What I want to dive into is more the behavioral side of improving your cognition, your ability to focus on tasks for a long period of time, and make sure that your brain really feels on your side in regards to bouncing all over the show and not feeling like you can really just pay attention to something for a period of time. And I think in today's world, that's one of these areas of just attention that is getting more and more rare, right? It's just really hard to focus on stuff. So, Mandy, we've been talking about this a little bit. It's a topic with our clients we talk about all of the time. And I think an area that just interconnects with so many other areas of health that we talk about all the time. We're diving into this one in the next month, going pretty nitty gritty with our clients in the both brain health standpoint, but also the ability to focus and get shit done. And I think separating that on the sort of short term, getting more done, and long term brain health is going to be a really fun way to look at this. So let's just focus on the short term right now. What's some of the key parts that I guess for your own activities or that you've been suggesting with clients that have improved your ability to get more stuff done in a week?
The short answer is choose one thing and do that. We talk about this quite a bit, right? That you can't chase two rabbits. We talked about this on the podcast last week, I think, and you
Yep.
gave the description of Barry running into a field and seeing a whole lot of rabbits and it just goes crazy. And the short answer is entirely that we just can't. Our brain is not even wired to be able to focus on multiple complex tasks at one time. And as humans, I think we think our cognitive powers are quite a lot more than they are. But I think the interesting realization here is there was a paper written back in 2012, I think, and it was titled "The Epidemic of Distraction," and it was looking into the increase in use of multiple devices and multiple things going on at one time, and our temptation and the ease with which we can just constantly task switch, and the impact that that then has on our ability to actually output stuff and stay productive, and then even longer term on how that impacts our mental health and even brain size and cognitive abilities as we age. So there's definitely it's a growing thing, but I think if you bring it right back into what do we do today, what we do today is do exactly what we talk to our clients about all the time, which is on a Sunday, whenever it is, write that list of what you're going to do in the week, block it into the day you're going to do it, and then do that one thing and just be okay with focusing on that one thing and getting it done. And the capacity with which you then bring mental energy to that thing is so much more than if you were to try and do 50 things at the same time.
Yeah, the judgment of doing more things in a period of time as opposed to doing one thing well probably holds us back more than we think.
Yeah.
I need to get more things done today rather than we need to do less but better. And I think that's been it's a huge theme for me this year. It's just actually saying no to way more stuff and giving myself 2, 3, 4 hours in a row of just focus time for particular activities, projects, creation, right? To make sure things happen. I think there's probably a version of that in the work that you currently do or the consolidation of your day in some form that just requires less decision making and total fatigue because that cognitive fatigue is a real thing, right? And I think with the Sunday time blocking or planning of the week, I think is a beautiful example that, I use as much as you to put that little bit of brain effort in upfront in
Mm.
order to reduce my cognitive load throughout the week, right? Because the last thing I want to do midway through Wednesday is to feel like I've completed a bunch of random tasks, but none of them have truly moved me forward. And now I have to select what the next thing is rather than being strategic from the Sunday, getting very clear on the big rocks coming in Monday and then building from there. Uh,
Mm.
and I think being able to look at this around the lens of what you're actually training, right? And I'm always going to use a visual of what I'm strengthening. I think, people know the phrase you either get to use it or you lose it, right?
Mm.
And I think we apply this to something like a muscle. So visualize a bicep in this regard, where if you don't train that muscle, it gets very weak very quickly. And I think the brain is very, very similar in so many ways,
Mm.
where the way that you train that brain and train that focus is something that then feels a little bit uncomfortable in the short term, but starts to get better and better over time. And you can focus for longer and longer periods, right? And I'm someone who always got thrown out of school for being unfocused and being rather troublesome. Yet now I can spend 4 hours without moving and focusing on one thing, right? To my detriment of meals. But it shows that is probably one, focusing on things I really care about,
Yeah.
and two, the ability to train my brain to focus on something for a really long period. And I think whether that's a I guess the assumption, Mandy, that comes with this, right? You and I both love what we do, the clients we work with, the impact we're trying to make. With the work that you're doing, the question is, why should I care? And
Mm,
there's one will be hopefully the work you do or some creative output is something that you find enjoyable. But the second part is where this ties into, and what we'll talk about a bit more later, around long-term actual brain health. And I've seen too many people that go through school, use their brain, leave school, never use their brain again, right? And their brain just turns to mush.
mm,
So being able to train that in the short term to both be more productive and really tick that box of having that dopamine hit of completing stuff that was actually enjoyable, but also, of course, those long-term impacts as well.
mm. Yeah, I think your focus is probably for every industry. It's important that you focus when you're at work. For some more than others, if your work is creative or um, thought work, essentially, then your ability to focus is so important, and yet probably at the highest level, the most distracted, because thought work is going to mostly be on a computer, and that's where you get a lot of that distraction. But even if that's not what's required in your work, it's still important in your life, in the sense that your ability to focus still impacts your ability all the rest of the time when you're not working. Your ability to be present with your family, your ability to stick to what you said you would do, to you intended to do some meal prep at the start of the week, and then you got distracted and it didn't happen, so the flow on effect throughout your week is that you eat crap. Focus is still important even outside of a work environment as well. um, and I think sometimes in life can be where we are the most distracted, because there's a lot going on. There's people, there's noise, there's things that are taking our brain off what we were focused on. So just being able to compartmentalize and keep things, and this is what I'm doing right now, and I don't need to be doing anything else, and it's okay just to do this, because this is actually going to move me forward more than trying to do 56 things at the same
Totally.
time.
And you were talking to a group recently, weren't you? Where it was either a civil engineering firm or in the road safety space. They're investing heavily in this more health space in order to make sure that the safety of their workers improves, right? Because if
Mhm.
you're managing a massive machinery, kind of
Yeah,
important to be focused, right?
yeah.
Otherwise, certain limbs start to be removed. So being able to improve that cognition, that focus, that overall health, how you're fueling your body and brain in order to be able to focus on stuff, whether it's in more of that reducing danger space as much of improving creativity and focus productivity, right?
Mhm.
So, seeing that we've had those talks and being invited to talk to that type of person also shows that whether thought worker or very much with your hands, it's going to be just as important. And the people that start to get distracted by the butterfly going past as they're managing a crane, it's not going to be particularly
Mm.
safe.
Mm. Yeah, it was forestry workers actually,
That was
which
the one.
is a
Yeah.
super high risk industry, and that's a massive part of it, is how are they showing up, and that ties into some of the more action steps, which is sleep and blood sugar control and all of those. But um, I think the brain gets good at doing what we do all the time, which is what you were saying before. We can build that muscle and get stronger at it. And one thing is, if you spend a lot of your time multitasking and distracted, the part of your brain that manages emotional regulation and all of those sorts of things actually gets smaller. And so you see this more likelihood of hyperactivity, but also lack of emotional regulation, which is more frustration and anger and those sorts of things showing up in people that are multitasking. And it's actually the brain change that's facilitating that. And if we think about it in that sense, it gives you a whole lot more reason to manage it so that you don't go down that pathway of being more unregulated in your emotions as well.
Totally. So let's look at this through the lens of ADHD, for example, right? Like this
Mm,
is something that we hear every now and then from clients that are saying, "Oh, I can't because I have ADHD." I'm like, "Welcome to 80% of the population now, right?" Like being able to focus on something has become really rare. And I'm
mm,
not saying it's not a condition, but I am saying what I am saying is it's a higher susceptibility to fall into this trap, which means that you are in control and you
mm,
are able to improve it or simply reinforce it. You can go both ways, right? And like
mm,
everything we talk about, whether it's dropping body fat, improving digestion, all of these things, you have a genetic component, you have a more higher susceptibility to, lower liver function or certain conditions, etc. Here, there. But epigenetics, right, how they're expressed, your natural, how you eat, how you sleep, how you look after your body, has your ability to express those genes in ways further. So if
mm,
you're scrolling into the night, you're not eating well, then ADHD becomes a lot more prominent. And I think
mm,
it's a good example or diagnosis slash pathologize the area where it's like you're not able to focus for long periods of time, and that's something that we can improve. And I think looking at this, where you're going with the multitasking component being
Mm,
something that a lot of us hold as a badge of honor,
mm,
rather than actually slowing down and being able to focus on the one thing for a long period of time, I find so much more helpful. And
mm,
just, for the business owners in the room, the amount of time I have this discussion where it's like, oh, you own 5 businesses. Okay, that means that you make no money, right? Because you're in a spot where you just constantly scattered between 5 different things rather than being
mm,
able to do one thing well. And I think there's probably great examples of that across the board. But I've
mm.
certainly seen this in professions where people are trying to juggle 5 different things. Imagine if they just had to juggle one plate, right? And much easier than five.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a great example, coming back to those studies component where they've done really, really extensive studies now where, it's pretty logical actually just saying it out loud. But if you just have to write down 1 to 10 or 1 to 24 on a piece of paper, then that takes you X amount of time. Whereas if you have to write one and then you have to write A and then you have to write two and then B and then three and then C, right? I haven't even slow down there. Um, that's my processing power. Uh, it shows you how quickly, it doesn't just double the time, but it drastically increases the amount of time it takes for you to complete both tasks rather than just doing one and then doing the other. And I
Mm,
think looking at that both in the speed to which it takes the first time round, but actually start to see the accumulative impact of that over a week, right? I talked to a
mm,
client about this the other day. I'm like, you can 100% go hard and just do 24 hours of work in one go, right? You can take the caffeine, you take the stimulants, you can stay on track and really just slog it out if you need to for a day. But could you do that day 2 and then day 3 and day 4? Like at some point you fizzle out, right? And I think logically everyone knows that. So being able to create that mental space, and ultimately it's looking at your brain like an athlete on the field, is how can I focus for that deep work period of time for 3 hours and then go for a jog or go for a paddleboard or something there where you're able to just actually get your brain away from it. So I do think this ties into an area we've discussed before and I'm a huge fan of, which is being able to switch on or switch off. Don't just stick in the middle, right? Because if you're just a little bit on, a little bit off, you're slightly distracted, slightly focused, you never get anything done. But two, it's still exhausting, even though you're not moving forward. And I think
mm.
that's where a lot of people find a high level of fatigue, even though they're not moving at the same pace they used to.
Yeah. Do you know there's some studies that on that kind of task switching thing and the cost of how much slower you go if you're having to do two things at once. It's about 40% loss of productivity, they reckon, with
Yeah.
having to multitask, that is so much. If you take that out over the course of a year, nearly half of what you could have done less, which is just phenomenally ridiculous. And you could have still done all of those things if you compartmentalized them into a block of this is what I'm focusing on. And this is where I think it comes down to our environmental design, essentially, recognizing the patterns for which we struggle with, and especially for people that maybe have ADHD or various things going on, we can still recognize the patterns of where the sticky area is. What is the thing that really gets in the way of us being able to focus? Because a lot of people who have like perhaps neurodiversity or whatever can hyper focus on something for a while. But what are the things that get in the way of that, and then protect for those things so that you can actually. And actually, I was having a discussion with a lady the other day who's struggling with a lot of brain fog and loss of mental clarity, partly due to uh, a significant hormonal transition, but also insomnia. And we're talking about breaking the chunk of focus time down shorter, because if you go out to say 40 minutes, you're starting to waver quite significantly by that point because your brain's working hard. But if you bring it down to 20 minutes, a 20-minute chunk, it's long enough to get into the flow of the activity, actually achieve something, and then stop, and break everything you do up into these 20-minute chunks, or work out what it is for you. But don't go past the point of where you can't continue to focus on the thing, and then, like you say, go out and do something else.
Mm.
Change, give your brain a break, and then come back to is going to be a whole lot more effective. And I think something else that I saw the other day was about when you do it in a chunk like that, you don't have to say no. We multitask because we don't want to say no to something. We want to do all of it. So if you break it down into a chunk, you can do that chunk in a shorter amount of time without saying no to the other things. You're just not doing it now. You're going to do it later. And so it's kind of easier on our psychology as well to be like, I don't actually have to say no to something. I'm just saying no to it for now.
Yeah. So let's go into let's push into this time blocking a little bit more, because I think this concept of visually having it in your calendar, we've talked about this a lot more, so I'm not going to go too extensive, but the concept of going into time blocking, we have a lot of backlash, I guess, on that in regards to my day's too busy or my day's too variable, etc. But as you've just shown, that will give you back what, 36 hours of your week, or whatever the maths ends up being,
Yeah.
by simply focusing on certain things. Now, where that looks with variables of, do you manage that department? Do you have other members to consider? Are you waiting on other people's work in order to move forward? Like, absolutely, we're not going to give you 36 hours, but can we give you back 4 hours in your week? And what does that now do to your ability to get a lunchtime break, your ability to go for a walk, your ability to get your workout in, or just switch off at the end of the day? Like, all of those things become possible when you get clear on what needs to be done. And I think a really cool part that I've seen actually, Mandy, over the last couple of weeks on this has been how often time blocking has allowed people to question why meetings are even in their calendar, right?
Mm.
Things that are just recurring, taking up like really valuable time on a Monday. And they're like, why are we taking this meeting? I'm like, oh, I just wanted to ask you a question about this. I'm like, what's the question? Oh, okay, cool. We got that done. No more meeting, right? Like, I just got an hour back. And I think seeing how often that comes up in the workplace just gives you ability to just be so much more proficient.
Mm.
So looking at that both with your own management, but your team or wider, collective makes a big difference too.
Yeah, yeah. I think it time blocking. It can be a very physical thing where it's actually you write in your diary, put it in your Google Calendar or whatever. But as much as anything, it is a mental thing of actually, I'm going to do this thing right now because this is what I said I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do this thing. So there's a mental aspect to it as well. And I think people can jump the hurdle where they actually do put it in their diary and they maybe do put it in their calendar, but oftentimes they don't actually go to that next layer of mentally, this is all I'm doing. They might do the thing, but their brain's still focused on 50 other things. And so you're still having this impact of not actually efficiently doing the thing you said you're going to do. And I like to think of this in terms of like in life example, if you take a little bit of time to think about your food, say for the rest of the week on a Sunday night or something like that, how much time does that free up for you through the rest of the week? Now, it might just be small chunks of time, but what about the mental space that that creates? That creates that little downtime in your brain activity that allows you to show up to the next thing you're going to do on any given day with more capacity. Like we don't kind of fully comprehend how cumulative these little decision fatigues are in our day, and if you can take some of them away, how much more have you freed up of what you can now put into something else that's more important or bigger or whatever.
Yeah, and with our a lot of our community, what we call pods, but small group talks with people in a similar position. So if they're business owners, if they're executives, if they're mums, if they're athletes, etc., we'll have these discussions. And one of the ones I've been having a lot at the moment has been this idea that, say you make $50 an hour, you make $100 an hour. If you are to then delegate out a particular role, and you can get someone in, a cleaner or a gardener or something, for $25 an hour, you're not spending $25 an hour. You're saving $75 an hour, right? And it's really interesting to put a monetary amount on that. And I think there's a lot of really successful people that understand this concept of being able to actually buy back your time.
Mm,
But to your point, and that's not even the important part. The important part is that you're getting back that hour, right? Money you
mm,
can get back, time you can't. And I think there's so many of us that simply focus on doing stuff in our day that we think we need to do, but just takes up more time. And I think if you're on this now saying, well, I'm not as healthy as I'd like because I don't have time. Well, this is the big smack in the face to be like, you can probably find an opportunity to do so. It's just the social norms of, I need to do everything myself, that I'm so slow and inefficient, I don't have any time. And I
mm,
think being able to really dive into that a little bit more does allow you to either, one, just say no and make it simple for yourself. Like, there's less stuff in your day that you probably need to do than you think you do. But then two, if you're truly taking on that much stuff and there's that type of workload or family life, or you're a single mum with 10 kids, then I talked to one the other day. Uh,
mhm,
then there's going to be things that you can do in your life in order to really simplify, right? Say no to the stuff that doesn't need to be there and pay for activities to be done to get your time back, provided you're in a highly skilled position or you've taken that time to get yourself into a career path where you'll have that financial buying power. right? So I think there's a big part of that where just being able to look at all the options that you do have on hand in order to improve your time allocation is a really big part. And I think where we're going with all of this and why we're going down this path, other than making sure that you're just amazing human beings that get so much more done and are productive and focused and crush it in your career as well as your health, is double tapping on that health part. And I think Mandy, even looking at the concept of the glucose monitors and tracking glucose directly was a really significant wake up moment for a lot of our clients around how much just mental activity and stress was the root cause of a lot of their resistance, insensitivity, um, and space where an inability to drop body fat, a dysregulation of hormones or digestion came back largely to their scatterbrain and inability to focus.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, our whole discussion today feels a little bit pie in the sky, but if you land it right down,
Yes.
relevant information no matter where you are on your health journey, because there's always these little things that are flowing. And if you're just starting out and you've got a million things that you want to do and you're trying to fit them all in and you're struggling with that, it's permission to, like you said earlier, do less and do better. Pick one thing and
Hmm.
focus on that and know that you're going to get more out of it by just picking the one thing than trying to do 20 at a time. And
Yep.
if you're deeper into this and you're kind of thinking, how does this flow? I've done the quote unquote health stuff and now I'm moving into the mental aspect or the lifestyle pieces of it, it impacts there too because it allows you to select that next thing and just focus on that, whatever that is. It's yeah, it doesn't go away. Like this is important for you and me who have been in this space for ages as it is for the person just starting out, right?
Yeah, yeah, and hence why health is something that allows you to gain so much out of life, not restrict everything. Right? I think it's a concept I want to hammer home for the rest of my life. Is just if you get healthy, it's not about what you're restricting and losing out on. It's about how much more you gain. And I think how you show up at work, how you have that productivity to really just get more done and feel like your brain, body, and just general flow is back. I think it's just a really cool feeling that I'd love more of you to feel. So we're going to keep that one short and sharp. Repeated behavior comes back to the ability to look at focus in a different lens around your tendency to try to do more stuff at once is the exact reason that we don't have any time. And not only does it mean that you're more stressed and scattered, it means that your health probably struggles from it too. And I think at least starting there, having a little bit of time to ponder that, will probably be quite beneficial for you. On the next one, guys, we are going to dive in a little bit more into brain health from more of a long-term psychological standpoint. So if you tapped on this to look at more of a, yes, I just want to make sure my brain is sharp forever, I get a lot of the stuff you're doing now. Stay around for the next one. We might dive into that.